Okay, it's time to introduce our next speaker. She is a research scientist at Meta AI Research, and before that she did her PhD at the Institute for Logic, Language and Computation. Will you please welcome to the stage Dieuwke Hupkes. There she is. Here's the clicker, and I give you the floor.
Fantastic. I actually missed my PhD defense in the aula because of the University of Amsterdam, because of COVID. So I'm very happy to at least speak in some aula and probably with a much larger audience than I would have then. I'm going to talk about large language models, or as you may have heard about them, LLMs. Now, for me, one of the most exciting things about large language models is that we can use them to make progress on long-standing open scientific questions. Language models are trained on incomparable amounts of data, more words than any of us could ever see, even in a lifetime. This means that they capture a lot of information about this data, and they can see patterns that we maybe couldn't observe. And as such, we can use them to learn more about that data, as explanatory models of that data, so to say. When I was doing my PhD and started to work with language models almost 10 years ago, we used them to learn more about how language is processed in the human brain. Back then, it was a relatively niche topic. Since then, language models have exploded in all dimensions. They've become much larger, are trained on much more data, and also they have many, many more capabilities. Back then, you could easily fit 10 language models on the memory of an average smartphone. Now, even if you had 100 smartphones, you wouldn't be able to fit an LLM. Back then, models were trained on less than 100 million words, which is already quite a substantial amount, I'd say. Now they're trained on trillions and trillions of words, basically the entire internet, and that number is still growing. Now, with all these increases, as we've all seen, also the capabilities of models have increased a lot. And this also changes the types of scientific questions that we can address with them. We still use them to study language itself and natural language processing, but now we can also use them to ponder philosophical questions related to truth or factuality. We can use them to generate molecules or maybe even proposals for cures of cancer. Maybe a bit more relevant to the topic of today, or to the non-academic workforce, also on the work floor themselves, they have become very, very useful. I bet that many of you at some point have used an LLM when they were at work. I personally use them, for instance, to do some mundane tasks that I don't really like doing, like formatting data, or maybe when I have some experiments and I want to visualize them, I ask Meta AI or ChatGPT to generate some code for me to do that, and this works very well. So I'm, I think, actually still relatively limited in how I use them. I've heard people say so many different ways in which they use these models. So I mentioned data visualization. I actually used a multimodal language model to generate some of the images for these slides. Sometimes with some problems, that's why there weren't 100 phones, but there were only 6, I think. Sometimes you can also use it to give suggestions or generic like problem solving. Sometimes when my OS crashes, I ask the language model if it gives me a solution, and it actually does. And I think this is great. Like, I love this. It really helps me a lot in just my regular day-to-day and takes away some mundane tasks that I don't like doing. I have to add, though, that I think it's very, very important to keep in mind that LLMs are not like calculators. It's not that you ask them a question and the right answer comes out. Sometimes the right answer comes out. Sometimes something wildly creative comes out. Sometimes correct code comes out. But sometimes it hallucinates, or it gives you something that's plainly wrong, and sometimes it's very difficult to distinguish if you're not a domain expert. For this reason, and I think this resonates very much also with what was said in the previous talk, I think that LLMs are not at the point yet that they're going to take over our jobs, but they can work together with us. And it's very important to always keep a careful look, not to outsource everything, but to carefully look at the output of what your LLM is giving you, and check if it's actually correct. For this reason, I think also it's really important that we invest in evaluation, which is a topic that I also personally work on and that I very much like, both for scientific and practical reasons, because at the end of the day, what we don't know, we cannot measure, or as the Dutch say, meten is weten, right? So with that said, I would like to wrap up by just saying, or some people would say, maybe I have to reassure you that I don't think your jobs are in danger at that point. I do think that LLMs can actually really help us increase productivity, but it remains very, very important to keep using your own human brain to look at their outputs. Thank you.
So cool that you would end with human intelligence. That's very important. Other people call that human in the loop or human on the loop. Yeah. Why is that important, and is it still feasible when everything gets automated and gets data on steroids, etc.?
What do you mean with feasible?
Well, is it doable, is it practical to have always a human in the loop? I mean, the large language models have already been trained, so it's hard to get in the loop afterwards.
I mean, I think so there's different ways of human in the loop, right? Like you can have humans in the loop during training. This is something which is very expensive, though it is how we train model. This is also one of the reasons they have gotten so much better in the recent years. Yep. I think that when you're using your LLM in your day-to-day, though, it is actually very feasible. So for instance, when I'm asking an LLM to give me some code to generate some visualizations, it's not that I just like copy-paste it in my terminal, close my eyes, and send it off to a publisher, right? No, right. I look at what's happening, and I check if it's correct. So on that scale, yeah, I think it's still feasible, and still I think it does make me quicker, even though I have to check the output, because otherwise I would have had to write all that stuff myself.
Right. And some people say that there's so much data in Llama or in GPT that they say, I know it's only statistics, but sometimes when I give it the right prompt, it looks like as if it's reasoning. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts on this topic.
I know, this baffles my mind. I think scientifically speaking, this is a super interesting question. Also because I think like there's this sort of tendency where we always say, yeah, it's just statistics. If this LLM can do this, then we're convinced. Right. And then it does that, and we just go back to, yeah, but this is just statistics. I think I'm too much of a researcher to make like a super strong statement about this. I personally think, maybe let me invert the question, I think that actually the fact that they do so well should maybe also make us wonder what is reasoning in humans, and to what extent are some bits of that also some statistical pattern matching, and what are the actual differences. Right. So as for the actual answer to your question, I think there is sort of a like split personality in me, where it's some days I'm like, okay, this must be actual reasoning, and other days I'm like, yeah, but it's only trained on that. I don't know. Let's see if we can learn something about this at some point.
That would be Dieuwke System 1 and Dieuwke System 2, right? Okay, well, thank you so much for getting here with us and sharing your research. Ladies and gentlemen, Dieuwke Hupkes. Yes, thank you.